Good evening. Good evening to you. I hope that you've had a good day. I've had a couple of days off because I've had some time with family. And I thought today's subject would be about allowing yourself to grieve and to express your sadness in relation to any loss that you might be experiencing in your own way. Quite often, friends, family, colleagues, and people around you sometimes have an expectation of how you should grieve. And it feels like the mentality is very much you just have to let it go, and that you just have to get on with it. And that's gone, so why worry about it? But there's something to be said for allowing yourself to transition through what you've actually been through in order to walk into a new beginning. Unless you process exactly what you've experienced in the past in order to transition ready for a new, it's very likely that if you don't give yourself the space to process, to reflect, to reevaluate, what will happen is there can be a tendency in your new beginning for a repetition of what you've just let go of, or what has just come to a natural end. I've touched base in one of my earlier videos that we live in a society that seems to encourage dusting yourself down very quickly and forcing the transition period of letting go of something and releasing it very quickly. And usually that's because many people are very uncomfortable with sitting in their pain and sitting with what hurts. But one of the greatest ways of healing is to allow yourself to actually transition through feeling it, to go through the various emotions of the letting go process. That in itself is a journey. That in itself is a journey. There can be an expectation from those close to you, or sometimes people that don't really know you, for you to just get on with it, let go, and to stop wallowing in what is perceived as your own self-pity. Usually such remarks are met by those individuals who do not allow themselves to sit long enough in their transition periods, and to in their transition periods when there is a need to let go, and then just to move on very quickly to something else. Now, the truth of the matter is, these are the subjects that I'm talking about, is getting in touch with your feelings through your transitions, your changes, and your losses, is a very unique journey. And these videos are very much about encouragement, about getting in touch with your emotions and your feelings, rather than out of touch by deflecting away from what you're actually feeling. How many times repressed grief can very much be part of many people's journey because they didn't allow themselves a sacred space to grieve the loss of something that came to a natural end, or just ended suddenly and unexpectedly. And sometimes repressed grief can happen because that space was not given, that space was not granted. And because it wasn't granted, there is a tendency upon a trigger later on in life for it to suddenly come back up and suddenly need to be re-evaluated and revisited again. No doubt, mental health and grief and emotions are three of the topics that seem to be very difficult for discussion in Western society, because I do believe that there is a tendency for Western ways to brush all of those subjects under the carpet, because it can sometimes be too difficult to touch base with. This year, I looked at a documentary on Netflix called The Casketeers, and I was amazed at how beautiful the relationship between the undertakers, who seem to come from the Maori community, and the Aborigines, and how their relationship with death seemed to differ so very much to our own. And I take the cultures in Irish culture and in the West Indian culture, that their relationship with passing of loved ones seems to be a very intimate affair. So very different to the British and Western way of doing things. There's a lot to be said for embracing endings and losses and transitions. And remember, for each loss, each transition that you pass through, you have to let go of something that either meant to you very deeply, and that can even be a value and a belief system of what worked back then, but what is no longer working now because you've outgrown it. The expectation from others to fix grief very quickly just compounds the grief process and makes it harder, with the pressure of expectations from others to get through it quickly, because you may be deemed rather uncomfortable to be around because of the way that you're feeling and the way that you're displaying your emotions. You may suddenly become demotivated. You may suddenly become, like you don't have very much interest in anything. You may be tearful and emotional. You may become less talkative. You may become insular and less extroverted than normal. And those things can be very, very difficult to individuals that are not comfortable being around what can be perceived as negative energy when one is grieving. Grieving is not a negative energy. Grieving is a fact. Grieving is a loss. And grieving is part of life in everyday existence. We go through a process of constant change on a regular basis. And some changes are easier to adapt to, and some changes are harder to adapt to, dependent on the emotional investment involved, dependent on how much energy that has taken place in that situation, in that circumstance, or in that person, or that event. Everybody's way of getting through it will be unique. But if you're a sensitive individual, a highly sensitive individual that feels very deeply, and you feel loss very deeply, it's really important to not allow others who don't feel it so deeply and so sensitively to make you feel guilty, because you are still in your grief and still finding it that you're not quite ready to come out of that transitional cocoon. Your soul knows what to do to heal itself. Your soul knows what to do in order to bring your transition of loss, of a loss of a cycle, of a loss of a relationship, loss of a loved one, to its natural, organic state of acceptance. And should you find those that may be close to you getting to a point where it's almost like they're losing patience with you because there may be a judgment that you're wallowing in your own self-pity, then that is not your portion. That is the other person's response to your grief. Your journey to a place of acceptance always must be in your own time. When you are ready, when you have processed your emotions, when you have processed your feelings, when you have processed your thoughts, and when you have processed your memories. In any loss cycle, irrespective of what that loss is, there will be so much emotional investment which encompasses all of those things. Memories, joys, sadnesses, laughter, regrets, hopes, dreams. All of those things are encompassed in loss. And so not only do you go through a process of grieving the loss itself in its singular term, but you also go through the loss of all those things listed that encompass grief. It's important to allow your soul to do what it needs to do at any given time as you transition, and wait for your soul and your body and your mind to accept exactly what has changed. Sometimes it takes your mind a little bit longer to accept what's in your heart. And bringing everything in alignment, sometimes that can be the challenge. Sometimes that can be the challenge. So it's important for you not to allow anybody to make you feel guilty for becoming a little bit different to what you normally are when you're going through a process of loss. Another thing I would like to mention today is that is that when you're going through an awakening, you will also go through processes of losses. You will start to lose a sense of who you used to be, but yet you haven't quite emerged into who you are to become. You will lose ego aspects of your soul. You will start to feel outdated, and you will start to feel that you don't belong. And indeed, in that moment, You don't belong because you are not who you used to be. And you are not where you used to be. And you have to go through a process of being patient with the journey to awakening and to emerging into a new, redefined, restructured you. It takes patience. It takes time. It takes adjustments. And it takes tolerance. It needs compassion. It needs empathy. It needs non-judgmentalism. It needs faith. It needs hope for the future as you emerge slowly, coming away from all what you used to know. So please be gentle with yourself as you transition any losses that you may be experiencing, any transitions that you may be experiencing, and anything that is coming to its natural organic end because you are growing and evolving, and whoever you may be party to and joined with on a soul level, they are growing and evolving too. You're going to go through a range of emotions as you transition, and sometimes you may not even understand it. Sometimes it may not even make any sense, and it's important not to force it to make sense, but to just trust that your soul truly knows what to do to heal itself. But most importantly, it's important to be true to yourself, true to your soul, and true to how you are feeling in that moment of time, and not allow pressure from external factors to dictate how long or how you allow your soul to grieve the loss that you're feeling. Be gentle, be kind. A butterfly never transitions in anybody else's time. It always transitions in its own unique time, just like you will. In love and beautiful blessings, Susan, Phoenix Wisdom, healing loss and grief. Please do take care.